Your soulmate just made the call they were afraid to make. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this fictional story begins with a single moment that changes everything. Stay until the very end, because what starts as one difficult decision slowly becomes a journey of courage, healing, and hope. Sometimes the hardest thing a person can do is not speaking to the world, it is finding the strength to speak honestly after remaining silent for far too long. This is not a prediction about your life. It is a story about overcoming fear, choosing integrity, and discovering that truth has the power to transform even the most uncertain future. For many months, the person in this story carried a conversation in their heart that never seemed to find its way into words. They replayed countless possibilities in their mind. They wondered what might happen if they finally reached out, what might change if they stopped allowing fear to decide every move they made. Every day they found another reason to wait. Every night they promised themselves that tomorrow would be different. Yet tomorrow always arrived carrying the same hesitation. The silence became familiar, but it never became peaceful. Deep inside, they understood that avoiding the conversation was only making the weight on their heart grow heavier. Listen carefully, because this is where the story begins to change. One quiet evening, after reflecting on everything they had learned through seasons of uncertainty, they asked themselves a simple question: what if courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it? That thought refused to leave their mind. They realized that fear had already taken enough from them. It had stolen opportunities, delayed honest conversations, and kept meaningful words locked away. They decided that even if the outcome remained uncertain, they no longer wanted fear to write the next chapter of their life. As the night grew quieter, they picked up the phone and looked at it for a long time. Their hands trembled slightly, not because they lacked strength, but because they understood the importance of the moment. Every memory they had carried seemed to return all at once. The lessons learned through disappointment, the wisdom gained through waiting, and the quiet hope they had almost forgotten all stood before them. After taking a slow breath, they made the call. Whether the conversation would be easy or difficult, they knew one thing with certainty: they would finally be living according to honesty instead of fear. Meanwhile, the other person in this fictional story had also been growing in quiet ways. They had spent months learning patience, building resilience, and discovering that true peace begins within. They no longer measured life by unanswered questions alone. They focused on becoming kinder, wiser, and more compassionate each day. Without realizing it, both people had been preparing themselves for a future built not on perfect circumstances but on genuine character. The journey had changed them both long before the phone ever began to ring. Don't skip this part, because the greatest transformation is not found in the call itself. It is found in the courage that made the call possible. In that single moment, they proved something to themselves. They proved that fear no longer controlled every important decision. They proved that honesty was stronger than hesitation. They proved that growth is measured not by never feeling afraid, but by choosing what is right even while fear still whispers in the background. That realization brought a peace they had not experienced in a very long time. Listen carefully, my beloved child, because this fictional story carries a lesson for every heart. Sometimes the most life-changing moment is simply deciding to take one courageous step after years of uncertainty. Whether that step is an honest conversation, an apology, a word of forgiveness, or the decision to move forward with integrity, it reminds us that real courage is built through small, faithful choices. Every sunrise offers another opportunity to become the kind of person who chooses truth over avoidance, compassion over resentment, and hope over fear. As this opening chapter comes to a close, the phone call becomes more than a conversation. It becomes a symbol of transformation. It marks the moment when silence stopped controlling the story and honesty began writing a new one. The future remains unwritten, but it no longer feels frightening. It feels filled with possibility, growth, and the quiet confidence that comes from living according to values that never lose their worth. And as dawn begins to brighten the horizon, the next chapter quietly waits, ready to reveal what happens when courage finally answers the call. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because the story has only just begun. The phone call had ended, but its impact continued long after the final words were spoken. The room was silent, yet the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful. For the first time in many months, the person in this fictional story realized they were no longer running from their own heart. They had finally chosen honesty over fear, and that single decision changed the way they saw themselves. Listen carefully, because the greatest transformation was not the conversation itself, it was the courage that made the conversation possible. As the morning sunlight filled the room, they reflected on everything that had brought them to that moment. They remembered every excuse they had used to delay the truth, every fear that had convinced them to remain silent, and every opportunity they believed had already passed them by. But looking back, they understood that growth often happens during seasons of waiting. Every difficult experience had strengthened their character. Every disappointment had taught resilience. Every unanswered question had prepared them to value honesty more than certainty. They realized that even the longest seasons of doubt can eventually become the beginning of wisdom. Meanwhile, the other person in this fictional story was also experiencing quiet change. Life had taught them patience in ways they never expected. Instead of allowing uncertainty to harden their heart, they had chosen to become more understanding, more compassionate, and more grateful for every opportunity to grow. They no longer believed that happiness depended on perfect circumstances. They discovered that real peace begins when a person chooses to live with integrity regardless of what tomorrow may bring. Those lessons quietly transformed every part of their daily life. Don't skip this part, because this is where everything begins to shift. Neither person could control every outcome, but both had learned that they could always control the kind of people they chose to become. They decided that kindness would always speak louder than anger. Patience would always be stronger than panic. Respect would always matter more than pride. Those simple decisions became the invisible foundation upon which every meaningful relationship is built. Day after day, those quiet choices created a future that looked brighter than either of them had once imagined. Listen carefully, because this fictional story reveals one of life's greatest truths. Courage is rarely loud. It is found in the quiet decision to keep moving forward after disappointment. It is found in choosing forgiveness when resentment feels easier, in choosing honesty when silence feels safer, and in choosing hope when fear continues whispering in the background. Those ordinary moments become extraordinary because they shape a person's character far more deeply than dramatic events ever could. As another evening arrived, they stood beneath a sky filled with countless stars and felt something they had not experienced for a very long time, a quiet confidence. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because they finally trusted themselves to face whatever tomorrow might bring. They understood that life would continue presenting challenges, yet those challenges no longer seemed impossible. Every obstacle had become another opportunity to grow in wisdom, compassion, and resilience. Every new day had become another invitation to build a life guided by truth instead of fear. My beloved child, as this chapter gently comes to its close, remember the quiet lesson woven throughout this fictional journey. The greatest victories often happen within the heart before they are ever seen by the world. Every honest conversation, every act of patience, every choice to forgive, and every step taken with courage creates a future filled with greater peace and deeper purpose. The story is far from over. In fact, the most meaningful chapters are still waiting to be written, and they will be shaped not by fear, but by the steady courage of hearts that continue choosing hope, integrity, and compassion one day at a time. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because what happened after that phone call became the beginning of a transformation no one could have predicted. When the conversation ended, there was no dramatic celebration, no instant solution, and no perfect ending waiting on the other side. Instead, there was something far more valuable, a quiet sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, the person in this fictional story felt lighter. The burden they had carried for so long had finally begun to fade. They realized that speaking with honesty had not made them weaker. It had made them stronger. Listen carefully, because this is where the deepest part of the journey begins. As the days slowly passed, they noticed subtle changes within themselves. They no longer woke each morning replaying old fears or imagining every possible disappointment. Instead, they began each day asking a different question: how can I become a better person today than I was yesterday? That simple question changed everything. They became more patient with others, more understanding during difficult conversations, and more grateful for the ordinary moments that had once gone unnoticed. Every sunrise reminded them that growth is not measured by dramatic events but by small choices repeated with consistency and purpose. Meanwhile, the other person in this fictional story was also moving through a season of quiet healing. They had spent enough time looking backward and decided it was finally time to embrace the lessons the past had given them. Instead of allowing regret to define their future, they allowed wisdom to guide each new decision. They discovered that true strength is found in humility, that forgiveness brings freedom to the heart, and that genuine relationships flourish when people choose respect, honesty, and kindness every single day. These lessons became the foundation upon which they would build every chapter still waiting to be written. Don't skip this part, because the emotional turning point arrives in the quietest way imaginable. One evening, while sitting alone beneath a sky filled with stars, the person reflected on the call they had once been so afraid to make. They smiled, not because everything had become perfect, but because they had finally stopped allowing fear to decide the direction of their life. They understood that courage is not a single heroic moment. It is a series of faithful choices made day after day. Every honest word, every patient response, and every act of compassion became another step toward becoming the person they had always hoped to be. Listen carefully, because this fictional story carries a lesson that reaches far beyond its characters. Life will always present moments that require courage. There will always be conversations that feel difficult, decisions that require wisdom, and seasons that test patience. But those moments also offer an opportunity to grow. Every challenge becomes a teacher. Every disappointment becomes preparation. Every act of integrity becomes another reminder that lasting peace is built from within rather than given by circumstances. The strongest hearts are not those that never experience fear. They are the ones that continue choosing what is right despite it. As another beautiful morning filled the horizon with light, both people continued walking forward with renewed purpose. They no longer searched for certainty before taking the next step. They trusted the values that had guided them through every challenge. They knew that kindness would never be wasted, honesty would never lose its worth, and compassion would always create stronger connections than pride ever could. The future remained unwritten, but they no longer feared the blank pages ahead. They welcomed them with hope, believing that every new chapter was another opportunity to live with authenticity and grace. My beloved child, as this chapter gently comes to its close, remember the quiet truth hidden throughout this fictional journey. Sometimes the bravest decision is simply refusing to let yesterday's fears control tomorrow's possibilities. Every sunrise offers another beginning. Every honest conversation opens another door. Every act of forgiveness strengthens the heart. And every step taken with courage writes another beautiful page in a story defined not by fear, but by hope, resilience, and the quiet strength to keep moving forward. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because the most important part of this fictional story begins after the phone call ends. Listen carefully, because many people believe courage is found in one extraordinary moment, but the truth is that courage must be chosen again and again. As the person in this story placed the phone back on the table, they closed their eyes and took a deep breath. Nothing around them had changed overnight, yet everything inside their heart felt different. The heavy burden they had carried for so long no longer seemed impossible to bear. They finally understood that the greatest prison had never been silence itself, it had been allowing fear to decide what tomorrow would look like. The next morning arrived with an unusual sense of peace. Sunlight streamed through the window, and for the first time in months, they didn't wake up replaying endless, what-if, questions. Instead, they simply whispered to themselves, whatever happens next, I chose honesty. That thought alone brought more comfort than all the excuses they had hidden behind before. They walked outside, noticing the gentle breeze, the warmth of the morning light, and the quiet beauty of ordinary life. It reminded them that life continues moving forward, and every new day offers another chance to become stronger than yesterday. Meanwhile, the other person in this fictional story had also been walking through their own season of growth. They had spent countless evenings reflecting on the kind of life they truly wanted to build. They realized that meaningful relationships are never created through perfect timing alone. They are built by two people who continue growing in wisdom, learning to communicate honestly, respecting each other's individuality, and choosing kindness even during difficult moments. Those lessons quietly shaped every part of their character, preparing them for opportunities they never expected would arrive. Don't skip this part, because something remarkable begins happening beneath the surface. The fears that once seemed enormous slowly begin losing their influence. Every time the person chooses patience instead of panic, fear becomes quieter. Every time they respond with honesty instead of avoidance, confidence grows stronger. Every time they choose understanding instead of assumption, their heart becomes lighter. They discover that courage is not one giant leap. It is 1,000 small decisions made faithfully every single day. Those small decisions slowly transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary journey of growth. Listen carefully, because this fictional story now reaches one of its deepest lessons. They stop asking whether life will always be easy. Instead, they begin asking whether they will remain kind when life becomes difficult, whether they will remain honest when the truth feels uncomfortable, and whether they will continue choosing compassion even after experiencing disappointment. Those questions become far more important than any fear they once carried. Their answers begin shaping a future built not upon perfect circumstances but upon unwavering integrity. As another week quietly passes, the people around them begin noticing subtle changes. Their smile feels more genuine. Their words carry greater patience. Their decisions are no longer rushed by anxiety or controlled by outside expectations. Instead, they move through life with calm confidence, knowing they cannot control every outcome, but they can always choose their character. That realization becomes one of the greatest victories of the entire journey, because lasting peace is never found in controlling tomorrow. It is found in becoming the kind of person who can face tomorrow with courage regardless of what it brings. My beloved child, don't skip these final words of this chapter, because they prepare the way for what comes next. Every difficult season had a purpose. Every delay carried a lesson. Every obstacle quietly strengthened the heart. The phone call was never the finish line, it was simply the first courageous step toward a future built on honesty, resilience, wisdom, and hope. As another sunrise fills the horizon with light, the story continues, reminding us that the greatest transformations rarely happen in a single moment. They happen one faithful decision, one act of kindness, one honest conversation, and one courageous step at a time. And somewhere just beyond the horizon, another unforgettable chapter is waiting to begin. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because every courageous choice creates another opportunity to grow. Listen carefully, because in this fictional story, the days following that important phone call became even more meaningful than the call itself. The person at the center of the story discovered that while one conversation can open a door, it is the choices made afterward that determine where the path leads. Each morning they reminded themselves that fear would always try to return, whispering old doubts and familiar worries. But they also knew something they had never fully understood before: fear only has power when it is allowed to make the decisions. From that moment forward, they chose to let wisdom, honesty, and compassion guide every step instead. As the weeks quietly unfolded, they noticed how much they had changed. The restless nights became less frequent. The constant overthinking slowly gave way to peaceful reflection. They no longer searched for perfect answers before taking action. Instead, they focused on doing what was right, one decision at a time. They learned that life is not transformed through one dramatic event but through countless ordinary moments where courage quietly overcomes hesitation. Every kind word, every patient response, and every honest conversation became another reminder that lasting growth is built through consistency rather than perfection. Meanwhile, The other person in this fictional story was walking through a similar season of renewal. They had spent enough time allowing uncertainty to cloud their perspective, and now they were choosing a different path. They invested their time in strengthening their character, caring for the people around them, and becoming someone who brought calm instead of conflict. They realized that genuine confidence comes from knowing who you are and remaining faithful to your values even when circumstances become difficult. That quiet confidence slowly became visible to everyone around them, not because they spoke about it often, but because their actions reflected it every single day. Don't skip this part, because one of the most important lessons is about to unfold. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had happened, the person in this story understood that the phone call they had once feared was never really about changing someone else's mind. It was about changing their own. It was the moment they stopped allowing anxiety to control their future. It marked the beginning of a life lived with greater authenticity. They realized that true freedom is not found when every situation turns out exactly as planned. True freedom is found when a person can face uncertainty without sacrificing honesty, kindness, or hope. Listen carefully, because this changes the direction of the entire journey. They stopped measuring success by outcomes they could not control. Instead, they measured success by the quality of their character. Had they shown respect? Had they spoken truthfully? Had they acted with compassion? Had they remained patient during difficult moments? Those questions became their daily guide. As long as they could answer them with sincerity, they knew they were moving in the right direction, regardless of how quickly life unfolded. As another beautiful sunrise spread across the horizon, both people in this fictional story looked toward the future with a different perspective. They no longer expected life to be free from challenges, but they no longer feared those challenges either. They understood that every obstacle carries an opportunity to become wiser, every disappointment offers a chance to practice resilience, and every new day provides another invitation to choose kindness over pride. The future remained unwritten, but instead of seeing a blank page with uncertainty, they saw an open book filled with possibilities waiting to be explored. My beloved child, as this chapter gently comes to its close, remember the message woven throughout this fictional story. The greatest journeys are not defined by one extraordinary moment but by the steady accumulation of faithful choices. Every act of courage weakens fear. Every honest conversation strengthens trust. Every moment of forgiveness lightens the heart. And every sunrise reminds us that no matter what happened yesterday, today is another chance to write a better chapter. With grateful hearts and renewed purpose, the story continues, carrying forward the quiet promise that hope, integrity, and compassion will always lead farther than fear ever could. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because the story is entering the season where quiet courage begins producing visible change. Listen carefully, because in this fictional story, the days after that life-changing phone call were not filled with dramatic miracles or instant answers. Instead, they were filled with something far more powerful: steady growth. The person who had once allowed fear to guide every decision now found themselves approaching each new day with a different mindset. They no longer asked, "What if everything goes wrong?" Instead, they quietly wondered, "How can I live today with honesty, patience, and kindness?" That simple shift changed the direction of their entire journey. Every morning became an opportunity to practice the lessons they had learned. They discovered that courage is strengthened through ordinary choices. A gentle reply during a difficult conversation. A sincere apology offered without excuses. A promise faithfully kept when no one else was watching. These moments did not seem extraordinary to the outside world, yet they became the building blocks of a life filled with integrity. The person realized that lasting transformation rarely arrives in a single dramatic moment. It grows quietly, one faithful decision after another, until one day you look back and realize you have become someone entirely different from the person you once were. Meanwhile, the other person in this fictional story continued their own journey of self-discovery. They had stopped chasing certainty and started embracing growth. They found joy in becoming more patient, more understanding, and more grateful for the people and opportunities already present in their life. They learned that meaningful relationships begin long before two people share important conversations. They begin with the work each person does on their own character. Trust, respect, compassion, and humility became values they practiced every day, allowing those qualities to shape not only their relationships but also every other area of their life. Don't skip this part, because one quiet afternoon brought an unexpected realization. While reflecting on everything that had happened, the person smiled, not because every question had finally been answered, but because they were no longer afraid of unanswered questions. They had discovered something far greater than certainty. They had discovered peace. They understood that peace is not created by controlling every outcome. Peace grows when a person knows they have acted with honesty, kindness, and integrity regardless of what tomorrow may bring. That realization lifted a burden they had carried for far too long. Listen carefully, because this fictional story now reveals one of its deepest truths. The phone call they once feared had become a symbol of much more than a conversation. It represented the moment they stopped allowing fear to write the story of their life. Every chapter since then had been written with greater wisdom, deeper compassion, and stronger resilience. They understood that courage is not loud. It rarely announces itself. Instead, it quietly appears each time someone chooses truth over comfort, forgiveness over resentment, and hope over despair. Those seemingly small choices slowly transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary one. As another season arrived, both people continued moving forward with calm confidence. They no longer measured success by whether life unfolded exactly as planned. They measured it by whether they remained faithful to their values. They celebrated growth instead of perfection, progress instead of speed, and character instead of appearances. Each new sunrise reminded them that they were becoming people capable of building relationships rooted in trust, honesty, and mutual respect. Whatever challenges still waited beyond the horizon no longer seemed overwhelming, because they had already overcome the greatest obstacle of all, the fear that once convinced them they could never move forward. My beloved child, don't skip these final lines, because they prepare the way for the next chapter. The road ahead was still unwritten, yet it no longer felt uncertain in a frightening way. It felt full of possibility. Every lesson from the past had become wisdom for the future. Every difficult season had strengthened the heart. Every courageous choice had opened another door. And as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, painting the sky with warm colors of gold and crimson, the person in this fictional story smiled with quiet gratitude, knowing that the greatest chapters of their journey were still waiting to be written, one honest choice, one kind act, and one courageous step at a time. My beloved child, don't skip this chapter, because every meaningful journey eventually reaches a moment when the heart finally understands what the mind has been trying to learn all along. Listen carefully, because in this fictional story, the greatest change did not happen in a single conversation or a single day. It happened quietly, almost unnoticed, through hundreds of small choices that slowly reshaped an ordinary life. The person who once hesitated before every important decision now walked with calm confidence. They had not become fearless, but they had learned that fear no longer deserved to be the voice they listened to first. Every sunrise reminded them that courage is not a destination, it is a habit that grows stronger every time it is chosen. The days became filled with simple moments that carried extraordinary meaning. A kind conversation with a friend. A promise kept without seeking recognition. A patient response during a difficult misunderstanding. These moments seemed ordinary to everyone else, yet they became powerful reminders that lasting change is built through consistency rather than dramatic events. The person realized that every decision made with honesty was another step away from the life fear had tried to create. Every act of compassion strengthened their heart. Every moment of gratitude made yesterday's burdens feel lighter. Slowly but surely, they discovered that peace grows where integrity is practiced every day. Meanwhile, the other person in this fictional story was experiencing their own season of renewal. They had learned that waiting does not have to be wasted time. Instead of allowing uncertainty to create frustration, they used it as an opportunity to become wiser, more thoughtful, and more patient. They invested in meaningful friendships, cared for their responsibilities with diligence, and learned to celebrate progress instead of demanding perfection. The quiet confidence they developed was no longer based on knowing exactly what tomorrow would bring. It came from trusting that no matter what happened, they would continue responding with kindness, wisdom, and humility. Don't skip this part, because the deepest lesson of the story quietly reveals itself here. One peaceful evening, while reflecting on everything that had happened since that courageous phone call, the person smiled with genuine gratitude. They realized that they had spent so much time fearing one conversation, yet the conversation itself was never the greatest challenge. The greatest challenge had been believing they were capable of facing it. Once they discovered that courage already existed within them, every other obstacle seemed a little smaller. They finally understood that confidence is not created after success. It is built by choosing faithful actions before success is ever guaranteed. Listen carefully, because this changes the direction of the entire journey. They stopped asking life to remove every difficulty from their path. Instead, they asked for the wisdom to learn from each challenge and the strength to respond with integrity. That simple change transformed the way they viewed every obstacle. Difficult moments became opportunities to practice patience. Disagreements became opportunities to practice understanding. Unexpected delays became opportunities to strengthen perseverance. They discovered that every challenge carried a hidden invitation to become a better version of themselves, and that invitation was worth accepting every single time. As another beautiful morning arrived, both people in this fictional story welcomed the day with thankful hearts. They no longer measured happiness by perfect circumstances or immediate results. They found joy in becoming people who could encourage others, offer forgiveness without hesitation, and remain faithful to their values regardless of the situation. Their peace no longer depended on controlling the future. It rested in knowing that honesty, compassion, and resilience would guide every step they took. Those qualities became the quiet foundation upon which every meaningful relationship and every hopeful tomorrow would be built. My beloved child, don't skip these closing words, because they prepare the way for the next chapter. Every sunrise now carries a new opportunity. Every challenge holds another lesson. Every act of kindness plants another seed for a brighter future. The road ahead still contains mysteries, but the heart that once trembled with fear now walks with quiet confidence. Not because every answer has been revealed, but because it has learned that the greatest victories are never found in perfect circumstances. They are found in ordinary people who choose honesty over fear, hope over despair, and compassion over pride, one day, one conversation, and one courageous step at a time. And somewhere beyond the horizon, another beautiful chapter is already waiting to begin. My beloved child, don't skip these final words, because every chapter of this fictional story has been leading to this beautiful moment. Listen carefully, because the greatest miracle in this journey was never the phone call itself. It was the transformation that followed. A heart once ruled by fear had learned to walk in courage. A mind once filled with endless doubts had discovered quiet peace. A person who once believed silence was the safest choice had learned that honesty, spoken with kindness and respect, brings a freedom that fear can never offer. The story was never about changing someone else, it was about becoming the kind of person who could face life with integrity, compassion, and hope. As the seasons continued to change, both people in this fictional story looked back on the road they had traveled. They remembered the nights filled with uncertainty, the questions that seemed impossible to answer, and the moments when fear almost convinced them to give up. Yet standing where they were now, they realized that every difficult season had served a purpose. Every setback had strengthened their resilience. Every delay had taught patience. Every disappointment had deepened their understanding of themselves and of others. Nothing had been wasted. Every chapter had quietly prepared them for the peaceful future they were now beginning to build. Don't skip this part, because this is the heart of the entire story. They finally understood that the strongest relationships are not created by dramatic promises or perfect timing. They are built through honesty, trust, mutual respect, forgiveness, and the willingness to grow together one day at a time. They discovered that real love is shown not only in extraordinary moments but also in ordinary ones, in listening without interrupting, speaking with kindness, keeping promises, admitting mistakes, and choosing grace even when pride tries to take over. Those simple daily choices became the foundation of a future that could withstand life's inevitable storms. Listen carefully, because this fictional story now reveals its greatest lesson. Fear had once convinced them that silence would protect them, but courage showed them something entirely different. Courage taught them that even when outcomes cannot be controlled, character always can. They could choose patience instead of panic. They could choose compassion instead of resentment. They could choose honesty instead of avoidance. Those choices did not erase every challenge, but they transformed the way every challenge was faced. That quiet transformation became the greatest victory of all. As another sunrise filled the sky with warm golden light, both people stepped into a new season of life with grateful hearts. They no longer searched for a perfect future free from uncertainty. Instead, they embraced each new day as an opportunity to become wiser, kinder, and more faithful to the values that mattered most. Every conversation became a chance to build trust. Every obstacle became an opportunity to strengthen resilience. Every act of kindness became another reminder that even the smallest decisions can shape an extraordinary life. My beloved child, remember this final truth. No matter what yesterday looked like, today offers a fresh beginning. Hope grows when it is nurtured. Trust grows when it is earned. Peace grows when honesty and compassion become daily habits. The future is not written by fear but by the choices we make with courage each day. And while this fictional story now reaches its final page, its message continues far beyond these words. The greatest journeys are not about finding perfect circumstances, they are about becoming people whose hearts remain kind, whose words remain truthful, and whose actions reflect integrity through every season of life. As the sun slowly rose over the horizon, painting the sky with colors of gold, blue, and crimson, the two travelers in this story quietly smiled and walked forward. They carried no bitterness from the past, no fear of tomorrow, and no need to rush what life still had in store. They carried something far more valuable, wisdom earned through experience, courage strengthened by challenges, and hope renewed with every sunrise. One chapter had ended, but a brighter one had already begun. And as they disappeared into the light of a brand new day, they understood that the happiest ending was never the destination itself. It was the people they had become along the journey.